Dave, can you hear us at home?
Yes, I can hear.
Yeah, he answered yes.
I have
Yeah, we got him as a PDF.
okay. My panda bear's seen better days, so better off that way.
I've done 4 full days. Understood. I can't do it tomorrow. We have sleep. And then that Sunday, we had plans that had been rescheduled from over April break. And April break, I'm on April break.
It's everyone does the April thing, because it's my name.
Oh, no, I'm on April break.
Oh, you're on it. Oh, okay. Oh, that's right.
So plans over February break because my birthday. I had to go back on February.
That's just a lovely gift.
Oh, February 25th.
No.
What tonight? I want to make sure.
Oh, the whole thing or what?
Full birthday twin.
No, one before each of you.
Oh,
But I put them there so that they'd be a conversation piece when you walked in.
and so it was.
That's awesome. So yeah, my good friends who live in Boston are just outside of Boston.
Oh, I definitely have that.
Because her birthday's in March, so we were kind of doing it jointly. And so we had to reschedule that. So we went that like next Sunday, and we went to a restaurant, and then we went
I couldn't read this.
exhibit. And
They're calling me.
Hey, one last minute thing, I apologize.
Yeah.
I'm a little happier.
Better. I remember meeting before that. I was worried that you were going to be able to, like, they did not.
Yeah, Edith is doing it. Was crazy.
Okay.
But I can't believe it's so long. This year I'm working hard.
Just so you know,
Best friends that I grew up with.
the presentation's when and Stephanie's opinion. So when you're, so just so you're, okay, because I know you're typically used to the PowerPoint.
Yeah, so you'll just scroll or you'll scroll.
Yeah.
You know why? Because I know she created it in a different programs than we use.
I just wanted to give you a heads up so that you weren't surprised.
Thanks. She's all into it tonight.
Good evening. Welcome to this April 14th, 2022 meeting of the Mansfield Board of Education. My name's Kathy Ward. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 7:02 p.m. Jill, would you call the roll, please?
Of course. Susanna Everett, Martha Kelly,
She will not be here.
Edith Ellison,
Present.
Dave Latrico. Let me see him.
He's here.
April Morin. Catherine Paulus. Jeanette Picard.
Present.
Kelly Zimmerman.
Here.
Edith, would you mind reading our mission statement? Something else to give you.
It is the mission of the Mansfield Public Schools, in partnership with the Mansfield community, to ensure that each and every child develops the knowledge, skills, and dispositions essential for civic engagement and personal excellence in learning, life, and work within our local and global community.
Thank you very much, Edith. Now on to the approval of the minutes of March 10, regular meeting. Do I have a motion to approve? Thank you, April. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Kelly. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Are there any objections to approving these minutes? Any abstentions? All right, minutes are approved. Thank you very much. Jill, do we have any communications?
We do not.
Great, thank you very much. That brings us to our first hearing for visitors. Is there anyone who'd like to approach the board? Martha, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to compliment our secretary. I really like it. Names of the townspeople who come to the meetings and just give a little description of what their comments were. Thank you. It's helpful to refocus and put everything back together again. Thank you very much.
Are there any additions to the present agenda? I don't believe we have any committee reports. That brings us to information, presentations, and actions. Superintendent report.
Thank you very much. I have some very exciting things to share with you tonight. First, I'm just going to start with giving you a little update on where we are with our experiences with this continuing pandemic and a number of cases of COVID-19 within our schools. We've been continuing to monitor. Okay. We've been continuing to monitor the cases and sending communications out to staff and families every week. I want to first let you know that the mask optional practice seems to have gone very smoothly. I believe this is the first time we've met since that went into practice. What we saw initially was that I would say more staff and students were wearing masks when it first became optional, and there are certainly fewer now. But I'm also seeing evidence of people recognizing that this is fluid. So sometimes I walk into buildings and I see people wearing masks that I didn't see wearing masks the last time I was in the building, which is really pleasing to see because it means people are monitoring their own comfort level and they're feeling comfortable taking masks on and off over time. So I think that's what we hoped for. And so that seems to be going well. I've not received any complaints from staff or parents about what's happening in the schools. As I mentioned, we continue to report out weekly. Our case numbers have remained quite low. In fact, I did a quick accounting. We have had most weeks about 3 or 4 cases in our schools over the course of the entire week. Last week, the cases went up a little bit. They've come right back down this week. So we had 14 total cases last week and 6 total cases this week. What I can say is that what we're seeing in our schools is mimicking what we're seeing, because I still get those community reports every week, and there definitely is a parallel there. And also, while it's becoming harder to say that whether or not there's any spread in schools, what I can tell you is that we haven't had any cluster outbreaks, meaning we haven't had a classroom or a group of students that we know spend a lot of their day together with an increased number of positive cases. So that's also very, very good. And that would be the point at which, should we have a cluster outbreak, when I would contact Eastern Highland Health and ask them to help me analyze what they think might be happening. And then I do just want to be clear, because there was some question about this raised with me recently. We are still operating under a health emergency, right? And Eastern Highlands continues to be the agency that has jurisdiction over our health practices. So I think I mentioned this when we were talking about masks. Should we have water contamination, for example, Eastern Highlands is engaged in providing us with whatever practices need to be put into place when that happens, and we have to follow them. If we had a cluster outbreak, Eastern Highlands may come to us and say, you need to do X, whether it's put all children and staff in masks or even close down the classroom, just as they do with flu, frankly. I mean, we've used them in the past when we've had flu outbreaks. So I just want to make sure that people recognize that although we have taken a formal vote to make masks optional, I do still have to follow the directive of Eastern Highland Health should anything happen.
Has there been any discussion about post-April break?
About doing what?
About anything post-April break? I just know there'll be a lot
break.
of people traveling and
Yep.
other people may have concerns.
So the last 2 communications, last week and this week, that I sent home, I did remind people about doing home tests. In fact, today, the commissioner of DPH sent out a communication that came to us through Eastern Highland Health, letting us know that with the approaching holiday that anyone who is gathering in a large group or with family members from, other places, that it is recommended that home testing be used as a mitigation strategy. So again, that's been communicated to families and staff both last week and this week. And that was the last bullet, actually, Kelly. So there you go. Guess I was going to say that and forgot. The rest of what I'm going to share with you are just about some really wonderful things that have been happening in our schools. And my apologies to the board. I try to give you written updates on occasion to share some of this good news. And frankly, there's just been too much going on for me to stop and take the time to do that. So I'm going to share a lot of that with you this evening. I hope you understand. The first thing I'm going to do is pass around these lovely bookmarks that come from our middle school, where they held a contest. I believe it was 6th graders. Oh, it was whole school. So a contest that the library held, and this was the winning bookmark, and they've been made up into these really beautiful prints, and so I thought you might like to have that, something new that the library did this year. And then I really want to spend a little bit of time sharing with you a project called the Witness Stone. I think you may have heard us mention this earlier when we perhaps did our deep learning report to you. The middle school may have told you about this. It's an 8th grade social studies and language arts project that's designed to give witness to an enslaved Mansfield resident, working with researchers and primary source materials. The 8th graders learned about the life of Titus, an enslaved black man who lived in Mansfield in the late 1700s. After learning quite a bit, not just about his life, but about practice of slavery and other historical elements of that time period, the students then had an opportunity in their language arts classrooms to use what they'd learned to, in ways chosen by them, communicate their understanding. That's a really broad way for me to say. What students did was wrote poetry, fiction pieces, op-ed pieces from the time period or from today, created art pieces, wrote historical accountings, any format they wanted. They did this over about a 2 to 3 month period, and then every 8th grade student was allowed to select 7 pieces. So this was a substantial amount of work, and display it in a celebration of learning presentation. This was how the gym looked before anybody came to visit. Families were invited to come on an evening last month. And when families came, they were given an overview of the project by students. And then you can see in the foreground there what the tables looked like. Each student had about a third of a table to display their work on. And each student also had a feedback form. And those who visited their work were asked to leave them feedback. And you can see it was very well attended. And the work was quite outstanding. We also had some press at this event. And so if any of you received the current last Thursday, we were the cover and the insides of the community section. So I'll pass that around so you can take a look at it, but it further highlights some of the students' work. Each student also was asked to write a self-reflection about what this learning meant to them, which was displayed with their photo. And on the right-hand side, you can see parents viewing the work. I'll tell you, I thought I was being like, a good Samaritan. My goal that night was to make sure that any yellow feedback form I found that didn't have any feedback on it, I would be sure to leave some feedback. I couldn't find any. I mean, kids all got feedback, and the parents I spoke with were incredibly impressed with the thought and the quality of the work. So, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead a little quickly. It was a really phenomenal evening, and much thanks go to the middle school staff and administrators for taking on. This was a significant project, but it embodies our expectations around deep learning and allowed the students to create what some of the literature we've read describes as beautiful work. It really was beautiful work.
Kelly, I just want to say I I did attend that night, and I was just blown away by the quality of the work students. It was just so impressive. I think Peter mentioned it was like museum quality. I was so proud of what the kids did and what the teachers helped them, guided them through. It was just a really wonderful moment for Mansfield.
Yeah, Jeanette?
I do get the current, and I read this, and I then brought this to our 8th grade social studies and language arts teacher in my district, and where there was a significant history of slaveholding, and I'm hopeful that this project will be moving to my district for next year.
Great. Okay, so go a little more quickly through the remaining slides. I know that there's been a lot of interest over the years in what we've been able to do with our greenhouses, and the 5th graders, as well as some students in an after-school club, have really attacked it this year at the middle school. Growing along the wall on the right-hand side are green beans, and then we've got lots of other plants, squash plants, cucumber plants, tomato plants, kale, all kinds of wonderful things growing. The hope is that these plants will be moved outside into raised beds, and Candace was actually sharing with me, they have a student who lives nearby who is interested in coming in watering and keeping it up all summer. But we will be harvesting quite a bit from the greenhouse this year, which is really exciting also. And then something new that we're trying in the middle school, we've used some of our ARP funding to try some partnering with the community to give all students opportunities that right now only some students have, and again, to create some authentic learning experiences that extend beyond the school walls. And so we have partnered with Valari Martial Arts, and this is the 4th grade at Goodwin School. They have been spending a couple of hours every day this week at Valari Arts, and they are going through a leadership curriculum. And so far, the reports have been really promising. Just to share with you what else is happening during this time, while there are some staff that are accompanying them to Valari, their classroom teachers are actually not. Their classroom teachers are staying back at school, where they are able to use that time to engage in the really deep planning work of a multidisciplinary unit that will be taught to students later in the year.
Kelly, just quickly, could you just tell me how does
So they actually have a martial arts curriculum that focuses on leadership skills and around ideas of, I believe it's respect and self-control and sort of the, digging deep and finding your own personal qualities.
Are the students going in cohorts, or are they mixing?
The entire 4th grade.
Oh, that's great. And then teachers from all 3 schools are working collaboratively?
So we're just piloting this at one school this year to see how it works, and hoping that we can grow it in the future.
Oh, great.
Yep, and we're also interested in finding other community partners as well.
That's wonderful. It's one of our core beliefs.
Right. And now I want to tell you a little bit about some of our teachers who have also had some exciting experiences and have some exciting experiences on the horizon. You, of course, remember that we have Connecticut's Teacher of the Year, Kim King, and she was called by the producer of the Drew Barrymore Show, which is a network talk show. She was called by this producer a couple of months ago and said, I saw your story on our affiliate news station, and I'm really interested in your work as a teacher. And interviewed her for about an hour, and then said, the Drew Barrymore Show likes to honor people doing everyday work. And she has an upcoming episode where she's going to honor teachers, and we may be interested in having you be on the show. And then he called back and said, we're also interested in having you bring some teacher friends along. So Kim suggested that she bring the other related arts teachers in the 2 schools in which she teaches, Southeast School and Vinton School, and a total of 7 teachers were interested, including Kim, in taking this trip. They were picked up by limo, driven to New York, spent a night in New York, and then received makeovers. And were given an opportunity to be on the stage. Kim was actually given an opportunity to speak. I believe the show is airing, I think it's the first week of May, but I don't have an exact date yet. I'll certainly share it with you when I do. It turns out they were among about 25 teachers from several states who were honored at that time, and they all brought home new clothes and goodie bags. So very exciting. And we also have some exciting news for some of our teachers who have recently applied for grants. So on the left-hand side, Jen Zugaraga and Michelle Mather, who are both teachers at Vinton School and happened to be dressed as they were for the Drew Barrymore show, learned that same day that their Fund for Teachers grant had been accepted. So you'll remember the Fund for Teachers program. We've had other teachers who've received this grant, and they will be going to Denmark this summer, and they are going to learn more about zero waste practices. They did a lot of research. They have found a network of schools and municipalities that are all working to be zero waste, and they will be traveling throughout Denmark. I forget how long they're there, 10 days, I think. They'll be traveling throughout the country, though, visiting schools and municipalities to see how they are managing zero waste. In addition, they're quite eager to help us find homes for all of the materials that we have in our schools that we won't be bringing with us to the new elementary school. And so Jen and I have had several conversations about organizations and other strategies to make sure as many materials as we can find good homes. So it will be really exciting to see what they bring back with them. Question? No, okay. And then on the right-hand side, this is Rachel Supernet. She is a 7th grade science teacher. She applied for Smithsonian STEAM or STEM, I'm not sure which it is, study opportunity. She will be spending 2 weeks this summer and 2 weeks next summer with a very small cohort. I think it's about a dozen teachers from around the country at the Smithsonian, learning behind the scenes at the Air and Space Museum and other of the Smithsonian museums related to science. And she will be coming back with all kinds of instructional materials and developed units. So congratulations to Rachel. That's it.
Questions? Martha?
I had a question about the gifts that all the staff received. Do we have an issue with things over $25? I don't know how.
Not in this case.
Not in that case?
No, it's not from a
Okay.
community
Not from a
member.
community, okay.
No.
All right,
Yeah.
okay, just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it must have been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think it was.
Thank you.
It's not too often you get that opportunity in your life.
I think it's wonderful that you are so supportive, the district's so supportive of our staff going out and doing some incredible things and the richness it brings back to our district. So you're to be complimented on
thank
that.
you.
It's wonderful. That's wonderful. Okay, that brings us up to MMS Modernization Study Report.
Right. So to Scott and Craig, Chip, sorry. Chip, I do that all the time. Thank you for listening to my report, but I'm going to invite the two of you to come forward from Colliers International, who you will recall we engaged some months back to help us consider what's next for our middle school. So just to set the stage, the reason I first brought the idea to you of conducting a modernization study is because several years ago when we conducted our facilities study and worked with the community to identify what the community's hopes and thoughts were about the future of our facilities, we said repeatedly that although we were starting with the elementary school because those were the buildings in most need, we would consider at some point also addressing needs at the middle school. The perfect time now for us to have engaged in this study because, as you know, the town is also conducting a facilities review of all of their buildings, and at some point, if there are changes that you would like made to the middle school, we should work with the town to figure out when in the timeline of upgrading facilities the middle school fits in. So Scott and Chip are going to give us a high-level overview this evening of the work that they've done and some of the options that you may choose to consider in the future. And it's all based on a report that was in your packet and has also been copied for you again at your places.
All right. Excuse me. Thank you, Kelly. I'm just going to introduce a little bit of the process that we used in this, in both Chip and my roles, is because we actually looked at the building a little bit differently and sort of tag teamed this process. In the component that Chip will speak about momentarily was really looking at it as far as the status quo, capital improvements. What is the ongoing maintenance that you're going to need to do with the building? You know, you're doing a lot of investment in this building, the new roof's going on, the PV system. But what are some of the other things, looking more long-term so you can plan out those capital improvement projects, you know, and even off those costs for the taxpayer? From my standpoint, what I did then in conjunction with what Chip and his team was doing is I really looked at the programmatic needs and deficiencies. I walked the school with Kelly, with Alan Corson, with Candace, met with Candace a number of times. We identified adjacencies, things that we could do to the building that would make it function better educationally, that would make it work better for a whole, for the student body and teachers, that address some of the handicap accessibility issues. So then, I put that also into this report. And so that's sort of from where Chip starts is the status quo. It goes into my portion of the review, which is sort of option 1, 2, 3. Option 1, we looked at what those programmatic deficiencies were and what some solutions might be to those and put a price to those. Option 2, if we took the next step, and I'll talk about this a little bit further in a few minutes, but if we took the next step and looked at the building as far as renovating it as new, and then compared that then from the third option to what it would cost to build a new building. So now you can really take a look at your short-term, long-term costs from a planning standpoint of status quo, capital improvement projects to keep the building in great shape, address some of those programmatic deficiencies, renovate the entire building as new, or build a new building. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chip and I'll let him talk about the initial process that he managed.
As we start these kinds of assessments, always find it's important to know what the baseline is. What needs to be fixed over the next 10 years in order to make sure that the schools stay operating properly, stay clean, stay safe, and want to ensure that any work that's done to modernize it is also addressing what needs to be fixed, because you have a building you need to maintain. So we don't want to get just that regular maintenance lost in kind of the more exciting improvements. So the focus that I have as I work on many schools is on addressing maintenance issues and upgrade. So back in November, came through the school with my team of architects, engineers, and went through all of the building spaces, went through all the components, looked at the exterior shell, the roofs, the windows, the doors. Well, not the roof actually here. And to identify needs related to those items. We looked at all of the interior spaces to identify issues with the interior finishes, the flooring, the ceilings, interior doors, the casework in the classrooms, auditorium seating, all of those kinds of items. Looked at the any HVAC items, heating, ventilating, and air conditioning that were not addressed with the new system that was put in. Looked at plumbing and electrical systems. Looked at code issues and accessibility, things that are recommended for maintaining the building as it is now. I want to be clear though that those items fix the building, maintain the building, but it's still a 1970 building with 1970 spaces in that case. But again, that really helps you establish a baseline of needs. We identified more than 70 individual items, some of them very small, some of them very large, and it came out to a total of about $6.6 million over the next 10 years. One thing that was that I do want to note is that we kind of look at each project on a scale of 1 to 3 priority based on urgency. Priority 1 are those items that really should be done in the next 3 years, priority 2 in the next 5 years, and priority 3 are the items that can be deferred beyond that. Your percentage of priority 1 items is relatively low compared to many schools. So that really is a testament to the work that you've put into the schools, the both financial projects and upgrades, as well as the maintenance work done by your staff and your contractors. So that was very nice to see as we went.
I guess before I go on, any questions, or would you like us to finish my portion and then we can open up for questions at the end? Or do you have any questions now for Chip before I continue on? No? Excellent. Okay, so again, building on what Chip just said, and what I'd like to say is that, the building built in approximately 1970, overall, and I think you heard from Chip, is in good condition. Again, you've been investing in this building. Alan has been doing some great work out there. You got the new roof that's almost complete, or just about completed. Door replacements, the mechanical upgrades. The building itself is in great shape. But what we looked at then is sort of that next step is what could we do? How could we rearrange the building? What are some of the things right now, the challenges with the building? So I had just put together a listing of those challenges that was in the report. I'll touch base on some of the larger ones. No particular order, I'll start out with the music department. Right now, some of the music classes are taught on the stage, and that certainly is problematic. When you have your plays or other uses of your auditorium. The tech ed room is sort of in the middle of your music suite, and it has an adjacent computer lab. Sort of tying in with tech ed and art is we identified a relationship there between tech ed and art that was not really being utilized and recognized, and that tech ed has an adjacent computer lab. Now that adjacent computer lab could also potentially be a great resource for art. We also looked at where art was located, upstairs, second floor. It's a little bit undersized. They're doing a lot with the space that they have. We looked at relocating that art room, relocating it down onto the first level and maybe adjacent to the interior courtyard so you could have outdoor art classes. And you could start using that and allowing that program to flow into the courtyard space, which opens up a lot of opportunity. By bringing those two together, of course, they disperse spaces. So this is sort of a domino effect, as you will. And we've looked at how you could implement this over the next 3 years. Would be getting the tech ed out of the music suite area. So music, then you could have the instrumental music, the strings, the band, chorus, all within that area. Free up some space, get them off of the stage, and renovate that area. Get rid of the tiers in the band room, because if you were building a new building, those aren't allowed by code anymore. You can keep them now, but we'd flatten that out and make that a new modern space. Relocating tech ed in art adjacent to each other, and then starting to renovate some of those other spaces. Programmatically, some of the other things we saw, you had renovated your locker rooms for the gymnasium and for PE programs. But the doors from the hallways into those locker rooms aren't handicap accessible. There's no elevator, so if you've got a young man, a young gentleman who is in a wheelchair or has some handicap challenges, there's no way for him to get to the locker room from the gymnasium or anywhere in the gymnasium. He's got to go out in the hall, down the hall, up the stairs, take the elevator up to the second floor, and then back down. So part of this we looked at, and we identified an area where you could put in a new elevator that would provide that function. Also, there's an option that elevator could be oversized to be able to house a gurney, because right now your current elevator is undersized and needs to be renovated. Instead of upsizing that elevator, you could just renovate the elevator in its current position, put in a new oversized elevator that gives you that access. So God forbid somebody needed to come down from upstairs in a horizontal position, they'd be able to do that with that elevator. We looked at access into your main office and reception for parents and visitors, that we'd really like that to happen from the outside. So there's a direct path. So we've put a plan in place that would allow that to be incorporated. So it's these types of programmatic issues. The media center, there's some underutilized space there, creating a classroom in the media center and addressing some of the acoustical concerns that we found in there. Again, an acoustical concern, that's not landing on chips. That's not really a normal maintenance thing, but it's a very lively space. And we think, with some minimal dollars there, some of those issues could be, certainly be addressed. The kitchen and cafeteria, modernizing the servery, opening up the cafeteria, similar to the new school you're building for the elementary school, where it's a little bit more of an open plan, allowing that space to become a little more interactive, let it be used for more functions than just a cafeteria space. So opening up the surrounding walls, opening up the servery, modernizing it as more of a grab and go. So all of these options were included in the report. Now, what we did is we said, okay, if we were gonna, we know CHIP's, plan and what the capital improvement projects are over the next 10 years. What we did in the option 1 budget is we actually combined CHIP's improvements and then these proposed programmatic improvements. And we provided a range anywhere between around 18 to 19 million, 19.7 for option 1. So that would include everything that was on CHIP's list and all of these potential renovations that could be phased or would need to be phased over summers. And again, you do one area, the dominoes fall, you've got to renovate some other areas as you go through the building, but it's definitely achievable. The next way we looked at this, option 2, this looks at the building as, let's renovate it as new. So renovate as new is something that the state can allow. You need to apply for it. You need to prove to them that it's a wise decision, both from a facility standpoint and from a fiscal standpoint, that it's going to save money versus building a new building. You've got 114,000 square feet. So one of the first things we looked at your space standard, your space utilization. How much space would the state give us if we were going to build a new building? And it's all based on your student population. So if you were going to build a new building, the state would say by their space standard, they'll give you about 82,000 square feet. And there's a handout. If you have it, it looks like this, as the state space standardization. And it's just a formula. You'll plug in the grade ranges within the number of students you have, and it plugs out a number, and that number that the state targets is 82,656 square feet. So that's what they say a building that houses 504 students, which is your max projected enrollment over the next 8 years for your grade range, that's what they say your facility should be sized to. Well, your facility right now is about 118,000 square feet, including the 4 portables. So we plugged in what it would be after we remove those portables. The portables are at the end of their useful life. And you come out on this, about 2/3 of the way down, 114,285 square feet. So that's what your building would be after you remove the portables. What this does is it just reduces your reimbursement rate. So you can see the number at the very bottom, 7.32%. So the reimbursement rate that the state would pay gets reimbursed or multiplied by 0.7232. And we use those to factor in what we believe would be the state reimbursement, the state share versus town share, if you were going to renovate a full 114,000 square feet. Yep.
Could you please repeat the percentage rate? 7.3.
Yeah, it's 72.32. It's on attachment A of the handout. So the resulting estimated cost, again, high-level range for option 2, renovate as new, is somewhere between a 49 and 52, roughly $52 million project. State share, 26.8 to 28.4. Total district share, approximately 22.2 to 23 points. Again, high-level range. We're using, for these calculations, some recently bid projects, renovation projects that have just bid during the COVID period. So again, we're not getting into details, but we're using high-level square footage estimates based on current bidding numbers that we have received to develop these ranges.
Scott, I have a
Yeah.
question. On option one,
Mhm.
you mentioned that that would be done over 10 years, largely work being done in the summers. What is the time frame for something like option two?
Most likely, because you've got limited extra space. You'd use certainly the portables as flex area. You'd have to create some swing space. Probably, and again, I'm shooting from the hip right now because we haven't looked at it in that level of detail yet from a planning standpoint. You're probably looking between 30 and 36 months and it would be sort of ongoing. You're not just going to do that work over summer. If you start to renovate this new project, you're going to start and you're going to go through and you're going to have to move kids around the building, free up space. It's a challenge, but it's not anything that we haven't done or solved for numerous municipalities throughout the state. So it could absolutely be done. You might have to bring in a couple extra portable classrooms. There may be some other factors here once you really got into how the education process would work. But it could certainly be.
Scott, could I just ask you to clarify? Did you say, Edith, option one would take 8 to 10 years?
Well, yeah, as a clarification to that, I think, Edith, we were looking at implementing, if we did it, again, the thought was right now, and we just gave you the overall range. If we implemented the programmatic changes, most likely those would occur over 3 summers, not a full 10 years spread out. Just because of the extent of the renovations and again, that domino effect, you'd want to kind of make that a little bit of a smoother process.
And there are, there are a number of the maintenance items that would be addressed in those projects. If you're redoing the cafeteria, any projects that were identified would be covered in that as well. So at that point, you would have a CIP program that over the next, however long it needs to be, 10 years, if depending on the projects, that would be in addition to that, but are rolled into that number. But they're in addition to those modernization projects. So you would make sure that still in that option one, you are addressing all of the maintenance items as well. But we're made sure we're not double counting them.
Another question. On these cost estimates, are you building in some kind of factor for inflation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and it honestly, it was a little bit more robust based on the current market. So yeah, we're trying to be conservative with the numbers, not knowing where this economy of ours is going. So then option 3, again, we looked at the space standard. So going back to that attachment A, and we said, all right, the states would allow us to build 82,656 square feet. Well, we know at times we've been successful pushing the state a little bit on that and nudging them on that. And they've said, normally we'll let you get down to about 92%. So what 92% means is it means the building can get a little bit bigger. So at 92%, it would result in a building of 89,843 square feet, just under 90,000 square feet. So again, it's important to see that you'd be going from 114,000 square feet down to the state's, by their space standard, is saying 82,600. And I'm saying, I think if we work with them, we can maybe push it to 90. They've typically allowed to do that in the past. And they recognize when you get into smaller student numbers, again, a middle school of 500 is a lot more challenging to build than a middle school with 1,000 kids, because the gymnasium stays the same, the cafeteria, the auditorium, all those big spaces. You have to have all those big spaces for either 500 or 1,000 kids. So when you get from the 500 to 1,000, you're just building extra classrooms. That's a lot more efficient. That brings your square footages down. So the state does recognize that it's a challenge to build a school with smaller numbers. It's easier when you got a lot of kids. So we, again, ran those calculations. We assumed, again, you'd look for a new site, because I don't really think there'd be quite a challenge to try and build it on the existing site. But for this assumption, we just made an assumption that we'd find new land if available. It'd be 15 acres for a middle school plus 1 acre for every 100 students, or approximately a 20-acre site. The total estimated project budget here was between about 60 and 64 million. State support was estimated at about 35 to 38.4, district share 25 to 25.6. Now here's where the analysis really starts driving you in certain directions. When you compare that to option 3, renovate is new, you can see that right now the estimated district share is a few million, between $2 and $3 million less. Also with the renovate is new option, you'd be renovating to 114,000 square feet versus building new at approximately 90. You've got a wonderful auditorium that there's no way you would get an auditorium of that size. Most likely you would lose your auxiliary gym. There would be programmatic challenges and difficulties you would have to make. The other good news with this is, again, with all of the good work, you know, we've taken into account your new roof and all the good work that you've put into the building is sound. In our opinion, the building is a great candidate for Renovate's new status. But what these initial high-level numbers are showing is that, in fact, it is cheaper to renovate the building versus building new, which is, again, part of the application process to the state, if you so chose to say, let's explore that a little bit further. So really, you have kind of 4 options here. You know, we start with CHIP, with the capital improvements and sort of the status quo over the next 10 years. Then the next decision step is, do we start implementing in you know, some of these programmatic changes and adding those into the mix? At that standpoint, you look at your overall numbers and you say, you know, right now from the estimates, it's not a huge reach, but again, you know, we understand taxpayer dollars are precious, and certainly this community is undertaking a very big expense as we speak. But, you know, the option 1 total estimated district share is somewhere between 17.5, 18.7. Right now you go to 22 to 23. Yes, it's, you know, $5 million jump, but you're a $5 million jump from a building that, as Chip had said, you know, some areas that are going to be new and renovated, those programmatic areas, but really a good portion of the building is still going to be that 1970s building. You know, so for that extra $5 million, potentially you get a renovated as new structure. And we did assume some, and I should have started with this, we did assume some state reimbursement for the programmatic changes and for a little bit of the work that CHIP would do. It wouldn't be a lot because unless you get renovation status, the state does not reimburse for anything that's a repair or a replacement. It's the R words up at the state. If they see repair replacement, they go, take out the red pen, 0, you're not getting anything for it. Code-related issues would be. So, for example, making your stage handicap accessible, taking the tiers out in the band room, some of the handicap accessible improvements to some of the bathrooms, specifically staff bathrooms. There was an investment in the student bathrooms. There are accessible bathrooms throughout the facility, but the majority of the staff bathrooms are very tight doors, not accessible, and date back to the original building. So some of those items, the elevator, for example, could be reimbursed. So we did make an assumption there that some of that would be, but certainly never to the extent of doing a renovation project.
Is there room, options to have some more innovative ideas? For instance, upgrading bathrooms to be gender neutral, where, you know, the way bathrooms are designed currently, they don't really offer much privacy even for same-sex bathrooms. So having full-length door stalls, you know, offering more privacy, so your actual bathroom space is more private, but then you're just in a shared space for hand washing, or that would be one of those like extras. Because I feel like we should be moving toward thinking a little bit outside of the box also if we're going to be investing all this, and some things like that I think I'd like to see us put some thought into.
Yeah, I will say that the sort of the option 1, the capital, the programmatic ones didn't anticipate that level of upgrades to toilets. Certainly if you were renovating new or building a new facility, there would be more room to try and accommodate those directions of you know, where we're going as a society. So certainly I think you'd have more advantage there. Could you look at something like that as a capital improvement project? Absolutely. You know, you'd have to take a look at plumbing count and how plumbing count would count a gender neutral bathroom versus The code right now has not caught up to society, shall we say? And they have a plumbing count for men and for women. They really don't define clearly at this point how to take a gender-neutral bathroom that would be servicing a large group of both sexes or both identified sexes, within the plumbing code.
Jeanette?
I want to make sure I understand. Are you saying that the capital projects were taken alone, those would not be reimbursed? But if the capital projects were taken as part of a renovate as new, they could be reimbursed?
Well, in essence, your capital projects all go away because you're renovating the entire facility as new.
Okay.
And when you renovate as new and the state approves that, all of those repair and replacements become eligible for state dollars.
Okay. Right. My other question has to do with some of the larger changes to the building. Some of those would involve programmatic changes as well. And I wanted to know, in your visits, did you talk with the teachers in those programs to get their thoughts as well?
We didn't drill down that far. I did have a number of discussions with Candace, and I know she did reach out to some of her staff. I can't really comment on the level of those discussions. But again, we're not programming or solving all the issues with those spaces. We identified areas that need upgrades and have deficiencies, or areas where adjacencies would be improved or could be improved with a little larger of a space. But certainly, when you start down that path to that project, then you would bring the teachers in and really define, what does this new space need to be?
Okay, thank you.
Kelly? Catherine?
No offense, but you just totally confused me. Because you're saying, to Jeanette's question, you brought in repair and replacement as part of the reimbursement, but then you're saying it's not reimbursable, so
Okay,
I'm
so
confused.
under the capital improvements, if you do a sort of a very phased over the next 10 years.
Scott, we call that pay-as-you-go here.
Okay, pay as you go. Okay, so pay as you go, unless it's specifically code related, wouldn't qualify for any state dollars. Okay, but if you apply to the state for renovation status, means we're going to renovate the entire building, all the pay as you go, everything else, we're going to redo the whole building all over, soup to nuts, like new for a 20-year warranty, then the state does pay for all the repair and replacements. So all the Rs become eligible for state dollars.
So if you renovated like new, did what you just said, that means that our 1970 building is no longer a 1970 building? Because you had made a comment earlier that with the repairs or with the renovations, we were still looking at a 1970s building.
Yeah, in option one, there would be portions of the building that really, for the most part, in some areas would not be touched. Doors,
So that's
finishes,
only option one, not option two.
layouts, right,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you for answering.
Kelly?
I think this question might be more directed for you. But is there an option that's more likely to have a greater impact sooner with kids who are going to be going to the new Mansfield Elementary School and then going to an older Mansfield Middle School?
I think that unless you moved all of the children out of the middle school in order to do a complete renovation or upgrade, whatever you decide, unless you could move everybody out, this is going to be a multi-year process. So, my guess is you wouldn't even start the construction for 2 years. And so children who are currently, who will be in the new elementary school might be at the middle school by the time it's finished. They might be gone. I mean, it takes a while to do this work. And again, it's because you don't have, you do have swing space. You have Goodwin and Vinton schools, but you would have to split your middle school into 2 buildings without all of the middle school facilities. I don't really know if you could use those as swing space. So it will be a multi-year process.
Would we be able to prioritize projects within this that would enhance their continued learning experience, or that whole process would be out of our control also?
Yeah, I think we'd have to look at the architectural details on that, but I can tell you from the conversations that we had, renovating the cafeteria to make it more of a multi-use learning commons space and relocating the art and music suites or rooms, as Scott was describing, those are the two, both of those projects will have an impact upon opportunities for learning.
Edith?
Another question for Kelly. I assume, or you, that any of these options are going to require a referendum?
Yes, so certainly renovate as new or build new requires referendum. But some capital improvement projects require referendum as well. So when we replaced the roof, for example, or I don't think you were on the board some years ago when we renovated the gymnasium, both of those projects, although neither of them, well, let me rephrase that. Both of those projects required a referendum because of the total cost of the project. The roof project is one of those eligible capital improvement projects that we did seek state reimbursement for. The gym is a great example of a project that we did not seek reimbursement for. We believed it would not be eligible for reimbursement because it was an R. It was renovating the current gymnasium. And so that project, which I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, was somewhere between $800,000 and $1 million, the town financed at 100%. And that did go to referendum. That was 6 years ago, maybe.
Catherine?
You're talking about the swing space, so let's say we're renovating to, like, would you take like section of school, like the fifth grade wing? So if you were doing that, could those transported or be put into the swing space, as you call it?
They could, but one of the things Scott looked at was continuing to keep those portables functional for a few more years, because there are 4 classrooms in those portables. We have 6 classrooms essentially right now at each grade level. And so with a little bit of, other finessing, you could probably relocate that small number of students inside the building.
Been talking about those years, they're not safe, they're this, they're that. They basically need to go.
They do. Long range, they do. But if you can hold on to them for 3 more years and get all of these renovations done in 3 years, they're worth keeping.
I'm sure Alan can do
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? I would just like to thank you both. This is very in-depth. I know it's a preliminary, but it gives us a pretty good idea where to jump off on. So can I just ask, though, what would our next steps be?
I think our next steps are just going to be now taking this information. We've got a couple more meetings with Alan. Chip is going to be developing that 10-year pay-as-you-go based on input from Kelly and the administrators and from Alan, and to sort of lay that out. And then we're going to take that, and we're also then going to fold in option 1, potentially over a 3-year period, which we've started taking a look at, is how could we implement the programmatic changes over a 3-year period, roll that into the capital improvement schedule, and then see what that did to the numbers year by year. So that'll be the sort of the final product that we're looking to establish.
And we've talked a lot about state reimbursement. So when do we connect with the state in terms of what our options are, what our financial possibilities are?
I think at this point, we're probably in a position where we would be more than happy to, accompany Peter and Kelly, if the board so directs, to have an initial just an initial conversation with the state to say, this is what we're thinking about. The state encourages you to do that. Come in early, sit down, partner with them, bring them into the discussion, and say, this is what we're considering. Here's our numbers. Here's what we think. We believe that a renovation, if you're going to pursue that, renovation project would be cheaper than building new. How do you see it? Would you support a project? You know, and in this case, you know, for doing this for 36 years, I think you've got a very good case, you know, if you so choose to go down that road for renovation.
So it certainly was, my understanding, helpful that we jumped into meetings with the state regarding the elementary school project. To me personally, I think I would rather see us connect with the state now and see what our options are, because the finances seem to play a big part of this. How does everyone else feel about that?
I concur.
Catherine?
Is this before the next step that you would go to the state, or would you guys do this next step part so that you had more information to present to the state?
I don't think the state would really, the next step that I talked about previously, that's really not going to affect our discussions with the state. So I think both could be done in parallel.
Okay, thank you.
Edith?
Well, I agree that it makes sense to talk to the state sooner rather than later and get a feel for how they regard this project. I mean, personally, I agree with Scott. I think that option 2, renovate as new, makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I agree.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Everyone in agreement? I don't think we need to vote on this. Martha?
I was thinking maybe if we had a little more information about each of the options, a little more fleshed out, then we could go to the state. It seems like this is a good structure, but we need more, a little more information maybe before we go to them. Or maybe you have it and we just don't have it. In this, it seems kind of, you know, like a little vague.
Well, I guess if you could let
Some things-
Kathy know specifically what, you know, other information you'd like to see, we can certainly work towards that.
Or would you mind if I responded to that? When we went to the state the first time with the new school for the elementary school, we had no idea what we were going to do. And we hadn't really even done a study yet. We just said, hey, we've got these 3 aging schools. We know something needs to happen. Can you help us understand what your process is, what kind of information you'd need from us, what sort of parameters we need to be looking at? And we mostly went to them to get information, and we just put our name sort of on their radar.
How did Wyndham get a 95% reimbursement rate?
So you
Is it too complicated? You
No,
know?
no, it's not complicated at all. In
I mean,
fact,
is that because of their?
it's their wealth. Yeah.
For lack of.
Or lack of, right.
Yeah.
Attachment B shows you a snippet of a chart that you can find on some state website somewhere. Scott, I'm not sure where you found that. But it shows you the reimbursement rate for every community in the state. If you were to expand this out, Scott's just shown you a snippet of the part that includes Mansfield, but that's exactly how they got it. They're eligible for more funding for all kinds of things related to education than we are.
So Martha, would you want to let me know what other information you would have? I personally feel strongly, having been to the meetings at the state when we initially talked about the elementary school, and just as Kelly said, it was they're giving us kind of what they will do, what they won't do, and giving us some guidance. So I think it would be important for them to do this sooner rather than later. But is there more information that you would like before we go and do that?
Well, I was just thinking a little more concrete information. You know, a little more cost breakout and so forth. But you know, you've done this before, so maybe the state, you know, doesn't need much information.
Okay.
I would just think that the better armed you are, the more information you have, it just makes you a stronger case.
I understand. I don't think it was a case. I think our initial meetings were, this is what we're thinking, these are what our needs are, where do you think we could go with this? And they kind of put a little wall around what we can do, what we can't do. So I found that very helpful. April?
I have 2 comments.
Please.
I think that because the state's familiar with you now from building the new school, I think it's a good idea to sit down with them and talk about it, just to find out what your options are. And like you said, you can find out what the walls are. My second comment is just, I'm brand new here. So I want to thank you for explaining this and making it easy to understand for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Jeanette?
It seems from what you've said that going to the state earlier will help us to see what our focus can be and will provide us with extra supports that we would not have otherwise and might help us direct where you went next for us. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. I also felt whoever mentioned it, that getting on their radar is important, so they understand what we're thinking. Anyone else?
If I may,
Oh, please, David.
oh, I've been waving. I support the idea of talking early. I just wanted to throw my 2 cents there. I think the renovation for the new sounds like a good idea, and certainly we should discuss this as early as possible. So I support that idea.
Great, thank you, Dave.
Can I say?
Any other comments? Yes, Martha.
So do they have a new structure there now? Would this be a new team of people?
No, we know that some of the people that we know at the state are still there, so, yeah.
That's a good question.
It is a good question. I think they changed offices again, though, didn't they?
They went back to the
Yeah.
fancy building downtown, yes.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I'll just mention that another next step that I would encourage you not to lose sight of is more conversation with the town council and the town manager's office, which I have started and will continue to do, just about where this project might fall in what I suspect will at some point be sort of a long-range master facilities plan for the town, because you will have to think about, how much cost the town can bear over what period of time as many needs in town are attended to. And I know that Ryan and I have already had several conversations about this. He was eager to see this report and to hear about how the board responded to it. So I will do my part while I'm here to stay in touch with him, but I just don't want you all to lose sight of the importance of continuing that next year.
Can you text us? Remind us when you're gone?
I could try.
All righty, we'll do. Martha?
No, I was at the meeting the other night at the town council, and, the list of 12 buildings. And so, I mean, this is a huge expenditure for the town. And then, we have this on top of it. And so, yeah, you're right. We need to not only work with the state, but work with the town and see how this blends with all the other
Absolutely.
work they are thinking of doing. Thanks.
Absolutely. Anything else? Gentlemen, again, thank you very much. Greatly appreciate this. And Scott, we're giving the green light to go have some fun in Hartford with whomever. Great. Thank you very much. And thank you for your patience waiting for us to get to you. So we appreciate that. Thank you, Chip. Thank you, Scott. Next, we have MMS field trip request.
Yes, so both Candace Morell and Larry Barlow are in the audience if you have any questions, but I'll draw your attention to the page in your packet. I think it's on page 22. You know that for many, many years, we have had 8th grade students that have enjoyed an exchange with students from Germany. One year we go to Germany, the next year the students from Germany come here. They live in each other's homes. They meet other children in the schools. And while we are in Germany or the Germans are here, they do a lot of traveling and sort of exploring the culture of each other's country. So, of course, it's been a while since we've been able to be with our German friends. And we're very pleased that in June, the German students will be coming to Mansfield Middle School. Their school was comfortable early enough in the year to allow them to do some international travel, and in fact, it was their turn to join us. So they will be here in June, and the middle school is requesting permission for an overnight field trip allowing students from Germany and the both the school partners and the family overnight partners here in Mansfield to accompany them to an overnight at a Nature's Classroom facility in southern New Hampshire.
Catherine?
I have several questions. So the 40 students is not including the 20 German students, correct?
That's correct. So
Okay.
it says there will be 20 German and 2 German chaperones, and then ours is 40 and 4.
There was a section in the application that really wasn't filled out. I don't know if it makes a difference or not, but a lot of blank spaces here. And
Well, it's all, I think that information, well, it says to be completed by administrators only, and
Right.
some of that information was included in the request, like the number of chaperones.
okay. Crossing your I's and dotting your T's. And what is the age group of the students that are going?
These are 7th and 8th graders. Yeah. 7th and 8th.
Okay. That's all I have for now.
Okay.
Martha?
I looked up how far away this is. This is about 200 miles from here. And I don't know, I think our town and our area and our state have so many things to offer.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if there's anything we could do, promote our, local resources.
Yeah, so
And,
we did. We looked at facilities. So we're looking to house 60 students, right, and 6 adults. And what was shared with me when I asked that question is that it was very hard to find a facility large enough to accommodate this many students at that time of year, because in June, a lot of the facilities are already up and running in different kinds of camp programs, not always for school-age children, but those camps are used by other groups.
No, I was just thinking of, the middle school and the community center, and just all the amazing Mark Twain House. I mean, just take them around day trips to Mark Twain
Yes.
House and the State House and
Yeah.
different things like that, and doing sleepovers at the school if they went with movies at night, and ice cream and popcorn. I don't know, just some things like that. If it's bonding and so forth that we want, and it just promotes our area.
Yeah.
And
So they do other
so-
trips. They do lots
I
of day
know.
trips in the area. They do Boston and New York, and this was the request of the organizers, so.
Can we find out something about what Nature's Classroom in Freedom?
Do you want to come up so you can answer any questions? Because these are becoming more detailed than what I know. I just want to remind you that because we have people at home, you have to speak into the mic.
So the purpose for this overnight trip, it allows them at Nature's Classroom, they actually provide programming for them, so it's not just the lodging. They plan out several days' worth of programming that the students will participate in small groups, and it is one part bonding, one part understanding each other's culture, and building understanding together. In addition to that trip, they will stop at a couple other places in New Hampshire as well. Knowing this exchange on both sides, this is very similar to what they do in Germany. So they'll do a several night, overnight experience where they take them from the town that they spend most of their time in to travel up towards Hamburg. They'll also do a longer extended day trip to Berlin. So the exchange is about building relationships with one another, also understanding each other's culture, each other's history, each other's customs. And so these opportunities provide for that. And we look to schedule opportunities that are close to home and also a little farther away. We, in the past, have gone to Plymouth and done the whale watch. The whale watch is sometimes a challenge at certain times of year, dependent upon weather. They were looking to do something different this year that could accommodate a large group of students.
And when you did Plymouth, they stayed overnight?
Yep, they stayed overnight for that as well. And both of those have been typically a 1 or a 2 night overnight experience. It's just part of the experience for the students together. that allows us to include not only the home host, but also our school hosts. And so this is one of those hallmark experiences for students that weren't able to host someone in their own home.
Edith?
I just want to say, I think it sounds like a fabulous program. I can remember doing things like that when I was in high school. Difference it makes to get away together. Group bonding. My daughter did the China trip, and that was an amazing. So yeah, I totally support this.
Kelly?
I am so happy that we get to vote on a field trip. To me, that just feels something so normal. And I know that these students have been through a lot over the last few years, on both sides. So I think anything that we can do to make this a positive, memorable experience for kids who've been doing things in the state and in their local community, I completely respect and support that. I believe in being local, supporting local, but I also think New England is part of our local, and I think that's just so great that these 7th and 8th graders will get to have an opportunity to share something they may not have done over the last couple of years either.
Anyone else? Jeanette?
I just want to say, I know from experience that Nature's Classroom is a very highly respected program, and it does offer all kinds of programming for the kids and different kinds of bonding and internal growth programs. And we are part of that larger village of New England, and so I don't think this is terribly far away for them to go. And of course, they are doing some of those other local activities.
Thank you. Catherine?
Candace, I'm sure I've asked this question before. I don't remember. How do you define what determine who can get it? What do they have to provide?
Yep. Happy to speak to that. I actually, a lot of what we're planning for the trips and experiences this year have been funded out of the German exchange program. Over the last few years, there have been a bit of a buffer that had built up over time. And so we were strongly committed this year to making sure that we made all of these experiences affordable for everyone that wanted to participate. And so much of the costs for every trip that we're offering as part of the exchange this June have been offset by that fund balance.
So does that mean that this trip was actually more expensive than the amount that?
Yeah, I mean, when you factor in the busing alone, transportation alone is a significant cost factor. So yep, we have offset a significant amount of this trip. There's a trip that they'll take later to New York City that's been offset. We really wanted to make sure that it's affordable for families. And if families had a hardship of even paying for the amount that was listed there in the trip, we work with families on that.
They just come and say,
Yep.
I'd love to go, but I don't have
Yep.
$300.
And we've also done that even with our exchange over to Germany as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
important.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Martha?
And I have no objection to students going on field trips there. My daughters did it. It's a lot of fun. But I'd like to, we're having a gas shortage here. We're having a lot of problems there. And I would just like to see what we could do locally. And it would keep the costs down, too. Our state has so much to offer, and I would just like to try to do that. And we can have fun. We can bond in Connecticut. So I'd like to try to do that. And I know you do other trips there, but and throughout New England. But in light of the present situation of the world, I would just like to keep it local. Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else? I just want to say I'm thrilled that the kids are having this opportunity again. As you know, both my kids, one went to Germany, one to China. And the one who went to Germany still is best friends. They communicate still. So just a fabulous experience. So very happy for the kids and really appreciate the staff that are willing to do this. That's a big commitment, so we appreciate that. All right, I think it's on to do I have a motion to approve the overnight field trip request from MMS to Nature's Classroom in Freedom, New Hampshire on June 5th through 7th, 2022. April?
My first motion, so I might need a
Go
little
for
bit
it.
of help. I do this right. I would like to make a motion to approve the Mansfield Public Schools school trip request form for the field trip to Camp Cody. Is that enough on the motion?
That's good.
Fine with me.
That's perfect. Do I have- Second? Thank
Yes.
you, Edith. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Raise your hand, please. David, are you responding? Okay, thank you. Opposed? Thank you, Martha. And passes. Thank you. Thank you, Candace.
I'll just add that we hope to continue the German exchange with Mansfield Middle School students going to Germany, but not until next spring. So often it's a fall trip, but next year it will be a spring trip, and Candace and staff will continue to monitor world health and in other situations, and may at some point next fall bring you a request for the German exchange again.
Great, thank you. That brings us to Mansfield Food Services update.
Okay, we have Stephanie Deason here this evening, and also Charmaine Bradshaw Hill is going to help out with this. There are actually 3 items in this information and presentation section. They're all going to blend in with each other a bit, but we're going to get an update on our food service program, and then Stephanie is going to talk us through the current meal prices and the recommendations for next year. And then finally, as you do annually, you need to adopt the healthy food certification. And the information about that requirement and the motions themselves were in your packets. And you'll remember these motions. Those are the really long ones you have to do every year. So I'll turn things over to Stephanie to get us started.
Hello, everybody. It's so nice to be back in person here. So we'll get right into it with our first slide. Just a little overview of what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to go through the rewards and challenges of this school year. This school year has been a lot different than the previous COVID affected school years. Talk a lot about supply chain, some year highlights. We'll look at our free and reduced rates, both pre-COVID and currently. Charmaine will head up our finance review, and then I will talk about financial implications for next school year. The picture there, so starting off with supply chain, it's been rough. It was not easy. Things kind of fell apart three weeks into September. Really didn't get better until Christmas break. And the variation of where things in supply chain kind of fell off the wagon goes from anything from McCain Foods literally running out of potatoes to produce potato products, to driver shortages, to fuel prices, everything that you can imagine. So our managers and our staff really rose to the occasion this year. And so did our classroom teachers. So at one point in October, we were not getting pizza. That's a pretty big deal in a middle school. So Nora came and talked to my manager and said, let's make you guys pizza dough. And we had the sauce and the commodity cheese to do it. And Life and Consumer Sciences made us pizza dough for, all 300 kids that we served on a Friday. So that is our homemade pizza from Nora's class. There's some more pictures too of some things that were chipped in through Life Consumer Sciences. So very thankful for their contributes this year. Move ahead. So supply chain disruptions, just to kind of paint a picture, at one point this year, from week to week, so we order on Wednesdays for Thursday delivery. We weren't getting that next day delivery until the following Thursday or Friday. At that point, we were already submitting our next week's delivery. So in essence, we were ordering blindly. Trucks would show up, things would not be on them. So for every Monday morning for, I would say, almost 2 months, we would call each other and play the game of what are we serving for lunch today. We pulled things out, we scratch cooked, we just really dug deep to do what we needed to do to get kids served. It was very trying, but things are definitely back in a different direction. Yes, we have the inflation and the rising cost of product, but trucks are coming in with product on them, not always what we order, but there are still just it's random. Right now it's cream cheese cups. The irony of that is I'm getting a breakfast product substituted with cream cheese and berries in it, but I can't get the cream cheese in the cups. So it's been all over the place, but the staff, like I said, have really risen to the occasion and doing what they need to do. Kind of moving on a more positive note. So I am so happy to be back in person, back in the classrooms. I participated in Career Day at the middle school this year. As I mentioned, Nora's LCS classes. Besides the pizza dough, they also chipped in every year. I make my nationally recognized kale zucchini bread for our holiday feast meal. That's something I would do in the past on my own time. Since moving out of the area, I can't just go home and jump back at the middle school for 10 minutes. So I said, hey, Nora, can you guys help me out again? So in 2 class periods, we knocked out bread for all K-8 schools for their holiday feast, something that would have taken me like 6 hours by myself. So very thankful for the kiddos. We had all our stations set up. They made me my sheet pans and we cooked them in the oven. And that's the picture of that bread, which was featured nationally in a magazine, School Nutrition Association, for the newer members here. I participated in Celebrate Mansfield this time for the first time ever. I feel a little guilty saying that, but that always kind of falls around my anniversary. So I'm never really around. That was a great experience. I have some pictures of that. We've upticked our catering this year, thanks to Kelly having us come out and cater a lot of her professional development events, the equity groups over the summer, and some PD training before school started. I worked with Lou DiLoretto, had a E.O. Smith Senior reach out to me, and I worked with an E.O. Smith Senior and a senior project surveying students on how they would like things to go at E.O. Smith in the future. I worked with Lauren on the new elementary mascot reveal. Kind of something I took on, really not knowing what the logistics would be, but we ended up, even though I was involved, and it wasn't a food-based reveal, all students at the elementary level did come through the lunch line and got a trading card of the new mascot as it was presented by the individual classrooms that presented them. So that was kind of a little plug for us, because even the home lunch kids got to come through the lunch line and get their trading cards, so we were just a part of the mascot reveal. So that was really exciting to work with Lauren on that. And then coming up, I'm a Disney kid. I'm super excited about the Lion King at the middle school. We will have a Lion King menu day. When we did Little Mermaid, I did some little things, and we played Little Mermaid videos during lunch waves, and it was really well received. So now that I have been looking forward to this since Lion King was announced. I have 2 pages of notes. I've been watching Lion King and taking notes. So we have I think I'll have some pretty classic things to do for that menu day. And then continuing our outdoor picnic at MMS, and then looking forward to continuing that trend at the new elementary school once everyone's together. Some personal achievements of mine, aside from everything I've dealt with in school. In October, I had the opportunity to take a school nutrition specialist, the SNS certification exam. It was a 220 question exam. The studying for it was really interesting. Some nutrition 101 stuff that brought me back to undergrad in dietetics, and then some much more higher end financial management things they don't really outwardly teach you. Yes, we pass our our accreditation and we pass our audits and stuff, but it was just studying for that exam was really informative and really positive. And then just recently, and this isn't, there hasn't been a press release yet, but Margaret gave me the okay. I was recently recognized as a Taste of Mansfield champion for the Economic Development Commission's inaugural award. So they're recognizing people in Mansfield that are champions of promoting local food in Mansfield. So I will be accepting an award at the town council meeting on Monday the 23rd, May 23rd. So that's just a little bit. And then on the SNS certification, I asked, there are only 13 of us in the state that have this certification. 3 are retired and 1 is working in New York. And then there are only about 25 registered dietitians working in school nutrition in Connecticut. So pretty kind of I was presenting in Nora's class, and one of the students had asked me, you know, what does that mean for you? And I kind of said, you know, it's kind of like when they see that on my title, it's like, you know, she knows what she's doing, kind of thing, in school nutrition. So it was a good question from that student. So looking at kind of more menu changes, you can go to the next slide. So there's a picture of our pizza. We've had a lot of product shortages, but we also, with that and product substitutions, have kind of gotten invented. So at one point in the year, I was at the middle school in the freezer, and I am like, why do you have 10 cases of tater tots? And they're like, they just keep subbing us tater tots. So I started doing a monthly feature of loaded tots. So we did a barbecue pulled pork loaded tot. The top right picture is buffalo chicken loaded tots, which we're going to have again in May. And then I kind of went out on a whim for St. Patrick's Day, and we had an Irish cottle loaded tot, which I would have jazzed up with some scallions and peas, but it was, again, kind of a throw the thing together kind of thing. We featured pot stickers for the first time. Chicken and veggie pot stickers are really good. I actually served an Asian-themed meal at one of Kelly's team leadership nights, and we did spring rolls and these pot stickers, and staff loved them, and the students loved them as well. And all the product substitutions, primarily in our individual wrap grab-and-go breakfast items. So we would order our normal mini pancakes and what we usually do, and I'd go into the schools one morning and see them at breakfast and be like, what is that? And they're like, oh, it's just a sub. The kids love it, though. So we've found a lot of new and a lot of fun things that the kids really enjoy out of all of the randomness that have come off the truck. So, you know, got to kind of take what you're given with that. So it's been interesting, but we, you know, everything that they're subbing falls within child nutrition guidelines. It's not like we don't have your regular donut sticks, we're going to give you Hostess. It's all still child nutrition labeled products, but just things that our kids are not used to seeing, and quite frankly, was changing weekly. You can go to the next slide. The next slide just has, so this is the collaboration I did with, on the right, all of those groups in Mansfield. So Grown Connected is kind of a Northeast Connecticut farm group. Taste of Mansfield, the Mansfield Ad Committee, and the Mansfield Farms to Families program. So we were all in one booth promoting all 5 of those programs, giving away apples and just information about farms in the area, and so sourcing locally. All right, so kind of switching gears into the more technical stuff.
Before you switch gears,
Yep.
I was completely ignorant that all this was happening. So thank you.
Thank you. So this is kind of to be earmarked for after Charmaine speaks about the financial overview. I want you guys to see that our free and reduced rates are pretty much consistent with what they were pre-COVID. So there isn't much budge there. Yes, while we've had universal free meals, we're still collecting applications, still certifying families for being on free and reduced. So just kind of a note for what I talk about after Charmaine, that our free and reduced rates have remained consistent since pre-COVID. Oh, sorry.
My slides aren't as fancy, so I'll quickly go through them unless you have some questions, so we can get back to the entertaining and fun stuff as it relates to the student meals.
One quick question. You said that you were still collecting for free and reduced lunch, right? But everyone was getting basically the same. Where is that funding coming from? I'm pretty sure it's in the budget, but I don't remember.
What funding?
Because isn't the free and reduced lunch people, isn't that reimbursed federally?
It's all reimbursed federally.
So even the kids that didn't necessarily qualify but are getting it,
well, if you're talking about paid students,
yeah,
we get a small reimbursement on top of the paid meal price.
Okay.
in a typical year,
Right.
but I think the question is about currently. So,
Thank you, Kelly.
yeah. We are still identifying students who would qualify for free and reduced lunch, but in fact, every child is getting a meal, breakfast and lunch at no cost.
Right.
And it's the federal government who is giving us a price or a quantity of money per meal to be able to do that this
Whether
year.
you're free and reduced
Or not.
And is it covered 100%, or does the non-students have to, what I'm trying to find out
Nobody
is where-
has to pay.
Okay.
Does the money from the federal government cover all of our costs? Still trying to figure that out. We're close.
I'm guessing it doesn't.
Well, we're closer than we thought,
Oh, good,
actually.
good.
We may make out okay.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
That was my, sorry.
And just to kind of piggyback off of that, I'm really relieved that that Stephanie and team are making sure that that information and that data is being collected, because all of this, anything you do with the Fed, there's a recording of every single thing. So even though we're in free and reduced across the state, across the country, I'm sure everyone is aware that will end. And so having that data and her being able to know how far we are from pre-COVID to now is critical for great decision-making, for her to make good recommendations, for us to caucus against those recommendations, and for you to vote on them. So her collecting that data is very, very critical, and I'm grateful that it's being done.
I figured Stephanie was going above and beyond because she always does.
So if we can take a quick, again, this is sort of like fundamental, am I good on the mic? Oh, okay. Fundamental data as it relates to the cafeteria fund. I always want to make sure that people really understand the cafeteria fund, because it is different from your general fund that you all adopt every year. The cafeteria fund is a governmental, what we call a special revenues fund. And because it's the federal funds are coming in and out of that fund, the expectation is that it will always be in the black, more or less break even. You can have a fund balance, but you should never be below. Okay, so at any given point, if for any reason that her struggles become so, and she just shared with you the struggles that she had, if she wasn't creative enough and talented enough to overcome those struggles, then or have the resources to do so, she may be in a situation where she would fall below the break even, correct? And at that point, then it would be incumbent upon the Board of Ed to cover that shortfall. Okay, so she's out there hustling to make sure that we stay in the black. Okay, so I really want to make sure that's clear. So there's money coming and going, there's federal funds coming and going, there's a whole lot of reconciling and auditing that's taking place because it is a government fund. So charge for services, that's sale of food, not so much now as it has been in the past. Intergovernmental grant, a whole lot of that right now, which is that free for everyone, free breakfast, free lunch. And transfers from the general fund. So again, that goes back to what I kind of teed up with in the event that there's a situation where her talents and her resources aren't enough to cover the gap in whatever's happening, either environmentally or economically. The board is responsible for filling that gap. Okay, so it functions as a not-for-profit. I indicated that you could have a fund balance. I mean, you know, she's so good at this, we make sure that she doesn't go too great as far as having a huge fund balance, because then it's counter to what the cafeteria funds, you know, goals and objectives are. And again, I reiterate, it is reconciled and it is audited, and the state audits it every couple of years, and even on sort of like a monthly or quarterly basis, we have to submit reports. If those talents and gifts were so profitable, that would be a problem. So there's a balancing act that has to go on here, okay? So I don't want you to feel like she's not as stellar when we move into the next fiscal year because she's not making $500,000. That's a red flag for the Fed, if you're making that kind of money on this fund. Intergovernmental grants, so again, it limits the level of the fund balance. So they're looking at about 3 months. They give you a little bit of wiggle room, especially now, because the cost of everything has escalated. And so at any given point, it's the supply chain nightmare that has a long tail to it, still is hampering things. So they're going to give us some wiggle room when it comes to what they call the 3-month average of the expenditures, because at any given point, like a grapefruit could be way more expensive tomorrow than it was 2 weeks ago. But for the most part, the general expectation is that she's not carrying a ridiculous amount of money in the in the cafeteria fund. So this is just sort of the running total. You'll see fiscal years from 2015 to the estimate for this current fiscal year, 2022. The revenues have picked up exponentially. See that in 2021, and you can speak to culture on this. So in 2021, the pandemic hit 2020, at the end of 2020. And then everything was free within a few months after the pandemic hit. And so now you have not only students not physically being here, but the whole concept that meals are 100% free, you get breakfast and you get lunch. So there might not have been the same level of participation, because students weren't necessarily in the school, whether it's K through 8 or E.O. Smith, because these numbers are reflective of the high school as well. And just generally it's a new kind of concept here versus in other school districts, okay, where there's free all the time. It wouldn't have been new for other school districts, okay? So when you look at the numbers, you can see a significant, and you'll see that there was a shortfall in 2021, $95,000. And I know I have spoken to this with the Finance Committee quarter after quarter last year when we talked through it. It's almost $100,000, but when you think about some of the other municipalities or school districts, that shortfall was substantially, exponentially higher than that. So she made lemonade with the lemons that she got. So, and we were able to, it was a shortfall, but you still had a fund balance of $40,000. Okay. And we were able to make sure that we were able to fund some of that with, again, your superintendent finding alternative and unique ways to supplement that shortfall with the other superintendent at Regional School District 19, where they didn't have to dip into their general fund, their operating budgets, but to make her whole and to give her sort of a springboard for the next fiscal year or school year. So here we are, 2022. We've got traction. Students are in school. Participation is up. I guess the random nature of meals makes it fun. Surprise. And so they show up. And so the federal funds that are attributed to this program, Seamless Summer Option, where everyone gets free, is really driven by participation. So the more kids participate against the enrolled population, the better off the district is. Meaning, let's eat. Let's eat, let's eat, let's eat. So whatever campaign you did obviously worked. So it wasn't, because I'm sure that there were still children coming to school with lunch boxes. So this is the opportunity to try and get them to try some new things without it, being at risk to them. Like, I'm going to use my ice cream money on, no, it's free. So try it. So she was able to get more and more participation. Obviously, kids were back in school every single day, and her numbers for breakfast were really impressive amongst many of the schools, because usually that's the skip meal, right? But her numbers, I think you were in the 59 percentile range, which is huge for breakfast. And so that drove your federal grant monies, because it's on a per meal basis per student every single day that school is in session. Okay, so she's on par to have, again, she's on par not to have a shortfall, that she will make a small profit, and therefore will have a fund balance that's in a respectable range, where there should be no worries for the exiting superintendent or the entering superintendent about how to cover a gap. Okay? And so lastly, if you can move to the next slide. Thanks, Joe. It's just a sort of a rundown of what transpired. So fiscal year 2021, beginning fund balance of $136,000. That's what we started with. The loss was 95, got you to $40,000. So, I mean, we were a little stressed, but it all panned out in the wash. 2022, again, we're on par for being in the black. Let's say that, and being in good standing. And then if you could just move on to the next slide. So barring any fears about shortfalls, let's pretend that, everything's cooking with gas, not oil, over like she has been in the past. The purpose of the fund balance is because the cafeteria or the food service is supposed to be self-funded, okay? It's supposed to be a break-even sort of environment where she should be able to do kitchen upgrades or make repairs for the respective equipment, make sure staff gets what they need from a training standpoint, those types of things. So fund balance is helpful there. Again, it's not a huge fund balance, but it's enough to get the things done that need to get done. Are there any questions?
Going back a couple of slides, revenue and expenditures. I just thought that the figures were interesting. We have fewer students now than we did in 2015. If you look at the revenue, and I know we increased prices, but even with fewer students, the revenue is up about 20%. But then the federal reimbursement has tripled. So I don't know. I just like playing with those numbers and looking at it. It's just something I noticed, and in the total column. That has gone up 5 times increase. So anyway, I just think it's kind of interesting looking at how the number of students, who's buying, the revenue, the federal reimbursement, how those numbers play against one another, and it's hard, I would think, to plan.
So right, so under the universal free meal waiver, everyone's eating for free, so I'm getting reimbursed at that free rate. I believe that was about $3.26 per meal. In the last 2 or 3 months, the federal government has actually kicked in an extra 25 cents on top of that per meal. So when you think about going back to paid lunch pricing, a meal at $2.50 for a paid student, I only get reimbursed from the federal government about 30 cents for that meal. So now you're looking at, I'm getting about $3.40 plus off of a free student versus going back to paid, reduced, and free, where I'm only going to be getting about $2.80 on a meal that costs the student $2.50, and then I'm getting that 30-cent reimbursement from the government. So now that all the kids are eating for free, I'm getting that top dollar reimbursement for every meal I'm selling right now. So when you go back and look at the past years, I'm not getting that, except for 2021. 2021 was definitely a factor of hybrid scheduling and students just not being in the building. But we are making higher revenue right now because of those factors. So when we talk about going back to paid, reduced, and free, there is going to be a decrease there from what I'm getting back now federally.
I just, our show and shows how difficult your job is, to me. And, I was just thinking about all the planning you're doing, and you're working with Nora and so forth. And so I was thinking, oh, geez, I remember something my mother used to say. And so I want to play those quotes, a quote from Plato: necessity is the mother of invention, and you're doing it. You really are. You and your team are.
Nora tells me she has no idea how I do anything other than work.
You.
So thank you. I try, when I present to her class, I do try and let the students know that I have a personal life and do things other than this stuff. But thank you for recognizing that. It's. I mean, I talk to a lot of directors, and we're all on a limb. And like Charmaine was talking about, we also I know the director in East Lyme very well, and he's in a position where he does have too much money, and he's actually kind of gotten a couple slaps on the wrist from the state on having too much money and having to spend down. He likes to joke about his food services Ferrari. You know, if we get in a position where we are looking at excess funds, you know, and what you would spend those excess funds on, I'm getting a brand new kitchen with brand new equipment. We're talking about an MMS renovation, which was such great news to hear. So it does get a little tricky when you do have so much of an excess. So yeah, you know, it's have money, but don't have too much. That's another kind of just caveat that goes along with this kind of thing. All right. You can go ahead, April.
I just want to applaud your creativity with the Disney and the Lion King meals and showing the videos. I think that's wonderful.
Thank you.
Is Nora's class going to make pizza dough again?
I'm not sure. Pizza hasn't been a problem. I know I've almost went to her for hamburger buns though, not too long after the pizza dough thing.
A couple of years ago, Martha and I went to the middle school to have lunch to see what the students were eating, and the pizza was, I would have liked to have tried Nora's dough. Let me put it that way.
All right, let's get up to, so we'll look at, so financial implications for next school year. Yes, as of June 30th, federal universal meal waivers are ending. There's been so much push. I follow a lot of the committee work that state of Connecticut's doing, what they did at Legislative Action Committee. And unfortunately, I don't think we're gonna get any push by June 30th. And quite frankly, it's getting too late in the year for them to kind of reverse on that. With that, we do project a decrease in participation. I can tell you, I've heard from a number of families that have told me that they participate solely because meals are free and wouldn't otherwise if they weren't, which is respectful. Everybody has a household budget. And we will look at pre-universal free participation rates compared to where I'm at now, and you'll see what Charmaine means with our breakfast participation and stuff. Of course, I've actually been to in-person food shows and some conferencing, and they, you know, without a doubt, we will have continued, obviously, transportation, increased costs, inflation, and product cost increases. The consolidation of the elementary schools is going to be so helpful for me, managing one inventory instead of 3, decreasing staffing a little bit, and just really, you know, my middle school works very well because of the team that they have and the adeptness they have to kind of pivot when they need to. So I'm really looking forward to having a similar composed team at the elementary school. It's a lot harder with a manager and a part-time helper in the schools that we have now to just kind of come up with something when you have a team of 4 where you can all kind of, you know, work on something and bang it out. So I am looking forward to that. Could we skip to the next slide, Jill, before I talk about that? So participation. So I pulled up March 2019. I pulled up March 2020, just prior to schools closing, and I pulled up March 2022. So you can see pretty much across the board, our top portion on the green is our breakfast participation. At Southeast, we've more than doubled. Goodwin, that's always been a thing at Goodwin. Vinton's doubled, MMS has increased, and E.O. Smith, that's actually a pretty significant increase for even E.O. Smith. And then lunch participation being up in the 70s, that's, I mean, the Vinton manager works in the smallest kitchen space and serves about 140 to 150 students a day. It's really amazing, and sometimes with one staff person. So they, like I said, they're doing the work. Middle school business has increased. I have a very likable team there. And man, what we could do with a renovated cafeteria space at the middle school. So what this, you know, I'm not saying that when universal free goes away, we're going to be going back to 50%, you know, 50 to 60% participation, but that does kind of loom out there. You know, what will it be like? And that's been a question for food service directors through this whole process, looking at the end of these meal waivers. You can go ahead one more. So this also speaks to that federal reimbursement that Charmaine was drilling into. So I pulled up, this is our monthly claim. So every month I submit a claim to the government of how many meals we've served at all 5 schools. And this is how much I get in reimbursement per month from the government. So we closed down in March 2020. You can see the difference in monthly reimbursements there, the 2021 school year, some difficulty there. I'll point to, March and May, kind of the end of the school year. I know May is when E.O. Smith came back 4 days a week. So kind of the more students we got, we did see increased participation, increased reimbursement. And then the school year has just been phenomenal in our government reimbursement. With the universal free meal waivers. I don't think we've ever made that much in profit from our Fed. So unfortunate that they're not continuing the waivers. Again, maybe it might be something. I do know individual states are pursuing this right now. California and Maine, I think, are a go for state-funded universal free meals. I know Vermont and New Hampshire is working really hard. New York's working really hard within the state, but we're just not there yet in the Connecticut legislature. So can you go back to the financial implication slide? So our main drivers and our rationale for increasing school meal prices. I don't know how many of you remember this, but there used to be this little calculator tool that the Fed put out where they would assign a federal average weighted price. So what that means is you put in your little calculator all the meals served in all 5 schools at the paid prices that they're served at, and it gives me an average. And that average needs to be within 10 cents of the federal weighted average. So in spring 2019, I think we had just come off possibly a year after doing a 25-cent increase, bringing us to what our current meal prices are and what they were still in spring 2019. So using the paid lunch equity tool, and paid lunch equity tool basically translates to the federal money that we're getting for our free and reduced kids isn't being used to also cover the cost of paid kids. So that's the purpose of the tool, is to set our paid kids meal pricing at a level where the federal money coming in for free and reduced kids is essentially preserved. So in 2019, using the tool changes every year because poverty limits and inflation and all that changes every year. So in 2019, when I used the calculator, our weighted average price was $2.77, and even at that time, the federal weighted average price was $3. I think going into the 19-20 school year, we were probably potentially looking at increasing prices then. COVID happened, we've been free since. Now, at that time, using this paid lunch equity tool, submitting that data to the state was a required thing. At this time, yes, there is an updated paid lunch equity tool. We are not currently required to use it, but just to see how much things have changed in federal standards, I wanted to see how far off the mark we are now. And you can see that our average weighted price at our current prices is pretty much the same as it was in 2019. However, the federal standard went up 18 cents. So my fear is that if we don't act kind of now, when it is becoming a requirement again to use the paid lunch equity tool and to really look at pricing again, I'm guessing they will jump right on this next school year because a lot of school districts will probably be facing deficit. We're going to be really far off the mark. So I'd kind of like to be more prepared going into next school year and get us closer, because if things keep going the way they're going with the economy, you'd have to assume that that federal average weighted price is even going to go up again next school year. That makes sense.
So your recommendation is?
So my recommendation is to raise each tier 25 cents to get us, and honestly, maybe not even close enough, but again, more prepared than we might be. I would hate to be sitting here next spring and saying, you know, we need to close a 50-cent gap instead of the gap we have now.
Jeanette?
Why is our price so low compared to the federal average weighted price?
It kind of goes back to just a history. I think somewhere along the line, we probably should have increased prices, and I think this might have been kind of lost in transition between myself and the previous director. So, you know, I think my year 2, I kind of jumped on this, and that's when we increased. And even at that time, we were lower than a lot of the area districts and a lot of similar districts.
So do our prices, well, I know they don't really reflect how much it costs, but what we're charging really is not enough? Is that what you're...
Essentially.
So Stephanie, what you're recommending is for elementary school, $2.75, middle school, $3, and $3.50 for high school?
Yes.
And breakfast stays the same?
Yes, there is not a paid breakfast equity tool, which is a little interesting, but I think out of the sake of preserving access to breakfast, we should keep the prices of breakfast where they're at now, which is nominal. The elementary paid breakfast price is $1.30. I believe middle school is $1.50, and E.O. Smith is $2.
Any questions? Catherine?
Can you give me the numbers for the breakfast again? And
Currently, elementary is $1.30.
mm-hmm,
MMS is $1.50,
mm-hmm.
and E.O. Smith's $2.
And what do you want to increase the meals to?
For lunch, elementary would go to $2.75. MMS would go to $3, and E.O. Smith would go to $3.50.
And what is the current amount?
$2.50 elementary, $2.75 MMS.
Wait, I thought you were increasing to $2.75.
At the elementary level.
Okay, what's MMS?
MMS would go from, currently it's $2.75 and it would go to $3.
Okay. And then the high school?
Is currently $3.25 and it would go to $3.50.
You're basically still off like 7 cents, right?
It does, the way that they calculate the weighted average doesn't exactly correlate like that, because you put in the actual, so the month they ask for, they always ask for October of that school year, I don't know why, but you put in the total numbers of meals served, so that does, that's why it's a weighted average. So if I'm doing, you know, a lot more meals at that $2.50 price than that high school price, it's gonna affect what the weighted average comes out to, rather than, because I'm not doing the same amount of meals obviously across the board.
And where does milk come into this?
Milk, so milk is included in a complete meal at no charge. For an a la carte milk right now, we charge 50 cents, and out of pocket, I think 1% is 26 cents, and chocolate is 27 cents. So we're making decent profit on a la carte milk.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So we need to have a motion to approve these meal prices. Edith, could you read a motion for us, please?
Yes. To set the Mansfield Food Services meal prices for the 2022-2023 school year as follows. Elementary lunch, $2.75. Middle school lunch, $3. High school lunch, $3.50.
Thank you, Edith. Do I have a second? Thank you, Jeanette. Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Thank you, David. I don't see any opposed, so that passes. Great, thank you. On to healthy food certification.
Right, I'll just do a quick reminder. You do this annually. We certify that we will follow the healthy food requirements with regards to the contents of the meals and what can and cannot be sold at other times of the day to students. So you have 2 motions in your packet, each of which is rather lengthy. And if you want to continue to receive funding from the government for meals, you need to adhere to the Healthy Food Certification program, and you need to demonstrate that you've taken a vote to do so.
Yes, Catherine?
No changes to previous years, correct?
No. Unfortunately, someone has to read both motions.
Or do you want Edith to read them?
Edith was going to read it. Thank you.
Okay, motion for a healthy foods certification statement, April 14th, 2022. Pursuant to Connecticut General Statute Section 10-215F, the Mansfield Board of Education certifies that all food items offered for sale to students in the schools under its jurisdiction and not exempted from the Connecticut nutrition standards published by the Connecticut State Department of Education will comply with the Connecticut nutrition standards during the period of July 1, 2022 through June 30, 2022. This certificate 2023, okay, yeah, it says 2020. Sorry, reading. This certification shall include all food offered for sale to students separately from reimbursable meals at all times and from all sources, including but not limited to school stores, vending machines, school cafeterias, and any fundraising activities on school premises sponsored by the school or by non-school organizations and groups.
Thank you, Edith. Motion, do we have a second? Thank you, Jeanette. Any further discussion? All in favor? That looks unanimous. Thank you very much. Next, the Connecticut Nutrition. Thank you, Edith.
Okay, the Mansfield Board of Education will allow the sale to students of food items that do not meet the Connecticut nutrition standards and beverages not listed in Section 10-22Q of the Connecticut General Statutes, provided that the following conditions are met. 1, the sale is in connection with an event occurring after the end of the regular school day or on weekends. 2, the sale is at the page. Is that right? It says sale is at the what happened there a little okay. Oh, and 3. Okay.
No, I'm going to go back to 2.
2, the sale is at
the location of the event.
Okay, is at the location of the event. And 3, the food and beverages items are not sold from a vending machine or school store. An event is an occurrence that involves more than just a regularly scheduled practice, meeting, or extracurricular activity. For example, soccer games, school plays, and interscholastic debates are events. But soccer practices, play rehearsals, and debate team meetings are not. The regular school day is the period from midnight before to 30 minutes after the end of the official school day. Location means where the event is being held.
Thank you, Edith. You want to read that again?
No.
Do I have a second? Thank you, April. Any further discussion? All in favor? Raise your hand, say aye. That looks unanimous. Thank you very much. And Stephanie, you blow us away every year, but this one, you're just, I don't know how we say thank you, but just marvelous work. We're very, very fortunate to have you with us. Thank you for everything that you do. Thank you, Charmaine. Appreciate it. And thank you for your patience waiting to come up and speak. All right, let's go on to the MMS roof project update.
Yes, so there has been work going on even this week at the middle school around the roof project. There was some drainage work that had to be finished, and actually saw some of the new drains that go from the roof all the way to the ground. They actually are very nice, and they complement the building nicely. Thankfully, the roof is holding up very well. And had a couple of bad storms, and things are nice and tight. We are awaiting the exact schedule still for the solar panels, but it looks like they'll begin installation of those solar panels sometime this spring.
Any questions? Great, thank you, Kelly. School building project update.
Okay, so we have quite a bit to talk about with regards to the school building project. I'll start by letting you know about the work that's going on in the building, because the building is coming along very nicely still. And in fact, the administrators and I had a chance to take an in-depth tour of the building a week ago, and it was actually really fun to see. So I think the building keeps being described in 3 parts. So the part where the gym and cafeteria is called Section C, and the part where the majority of classrooms are, so like the grades 1 through 4 classrooms, upstairs and downstairs, that's Section B. And then Section A is like the office and the kindergarten and preschool classrooms. Well, Section B is the section that's furthest along. They actually, in some of those rooms, are getting ready to paint first coat, which is really exciting. So drywall's going up, and it's really moving along. In Section A, which is that pre-K office area, they recently poured the cement slabs, and the walls are going up. And then in Section C, which is the gym and cafeteria, they are getting the roof completed. The other thing that's happening in Section B is that they're starting to apply the exterior materials. So they've done a lot of the special coatings and now the insulation, and within a week or two, probably some of the siding as well. So the building is clearly taking shape. However, in our school building committee today, Newfield Construction, our construction company, announced that there have been some procurement issues. So there are delays in some of the essential mechanical and electrical equipment, including the main HVAC system, so the system that brings in outside air, runs it through its motors, and produces the heating and cooling in the building. That's a very large system. In fact, it's so large that when we took our tour, they said, this is where the HVAC system will go, and we haven't finished the walls yet because the system's so big, it needs to fit in here. It was actually due to be shipped last week. Not having heard from the supplier, the construction company called them and found that, in fact, it was not ready to be shipped, that the motors had been delayed, and they were looking at a 10-week delay. So they're working now to see if they can at least get the guts of the system installed, and then have the technicians from the company come out and install the motors when the motors arrive. But when they, and there have been a few other things, switches for the generator. There's still some questions about 20% of the lighting package. So when they received this news, they started working on a revised schedule. Schedule that we were given at 4 o'clock this afternoon now shows substantial completion date of the building of October 5th. And the substantial completion of the site a little bit later that month, I think around October 28th, thanks. The site completion, there's still some uncertainties about that as well, which has raised some concerns about the total completion of the project, completion to the degree that allows us to be in the building. So it's quite evident that we need to get Plan B up and running, which, we've known all along that procurement could be an issue. We've known all along that other COVID interruptions could be affecting this project, and that things come up on a construction project, especially one that did have as tight a window as this one did. So the administrators and I have actually been talking about the need for a Plan B for quite some time. And tomorrow I will be prepared to send a communication to our families. And in fact, it's a communication that Ryan and I have been working on together that will go to the community members at large as well, to let people know that we do have plans for a Plan B, and we think we can still meet our goals of our consolidation goals, right? Our consolidation goals were to bring all of our children, families, and staff together into one community. And we made a promise that we would do that without affecting class size or the depth and breadth of programming. And we know that we can accomplish that in Plan B. All it means is it takes a little bit longer to finish our journey to get into the new building. Part of the work that we've done on considering Plan B is working with our transportation provider, because we can make any plan we want, but if we can't get kids to school, it's not going to work. So again, we started these conversations before we knew it was going to be necessary. And as luck would have it, the M&J bus contacted me last week and said, we think we've got a plan. And so we had scheduled a meeting with them for Wednesday of this week. So everything's falling nicely into place time-wise. What we've identified is that by putting pre-K, K, and grade 1 students at Vinton School and putting grades 2, 3, and 4 students at Goodwin School, we can meet our goals, bringing students, families, and staff together in community, and provide depth and breadth of programming, and successfully transport those children without extending the bus times that we use now. So now we have children that are on buses no more than 45 minutes, and that will be the case in this plan as well. Further, we were really excited that M&J Bus demonstrated their recognition of family needs, and they actually have been able to put routes together so that if you have more than one child in a family, regardless of whether or not they both go to the same school to start the year or 2 schools to start the year, they will be picked up at the same time and they will be dropped off at the same time. So for families, it'll be as it is this year. You'll get a bus route, the time of day that the bus is coming, and all of your elementary children will get on the bus at the same time. So there are lots of other details to work out. We've started talking about all of them, and we need to go deeper with some of them. We need to have more communication with parents about all of this. But, Peter's in the audience here. He's welcome to disagree, but I don't think he will. I really think we can truly make this part of the process of moving into the new building. Our teachers have done a great job this year of engaging students in understanding how the new school is being built and building some excitement about being there. And I think we can continue that. It's just we've got another step in the process next year.
Ellie?
Will we be able to relook at our calendar? Just off the top of my head, I don't want teachers to crack or feel pressure with a third year of non-typical teaching. And I would think that even if we pushed back that to like Thanksgiving week, let's say, where we typically have conferences, maybe we are just not having school that week for students and allowing teachers transition time to successfully move in their classrooms and then be ready to have students come. So I would like to advocate for staff in that way, and maybe we can revisit the calendar once you hash out some more details.
Yeah, so let me respond to a couple of things. The first thing I want to make abundantly clear is that the schedule we were presented today had the dates on it that I announced. Those necessarily are not the move-in dates, right? This is the third revision to the substantial completion schedule that we've been given. So I don't think we can make any plans until we get closer to the date. The first date was in July, the second date was in August, we were all good, and then this third date. So I think we need to be careful about that.
I thought one of the dates was June.
No, the first substantial completion date was a July date. The other thing I want to share with you is that using some of our ARP funding, we felt it was appropriate to set aside some funds to ensure that we could really meet student needs, that we added enough funding to pay teachers for additional work days. And we had worked out an MOU agreement with teachers to give them both some flexibility to pack and move and some days together to do preparation. So that will all be adjusted again, but clearly you don't move over a weekend. And so will there be the need to do some calendar change? There might be, but it's too early to know that. So, but it's been part of the discussion.
Great, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, and I mean, I think it would be advantageous, even if the school is ready, that we're doing it in a sustainable way. Like if it ends up being that we then maybe do a 2-week winter break to allow teachers more time or something like that, we could be giving tours of the building to the community once it has a CO. There's different ways we could bring one class grade level at a time. I think there's a lot of creative ways to think about this, but I don't think that it should be hey, we have the date, it's a rush now to get in. I think it should be mindfully planned.
Nobody will disagree.
Martha?
Budget implications for this?
Yeah, I don't think so. I asked about that today. So there will be the need for a moving company to support 2 moves instead of 1. It appears that those costs can be covered in the project cost. There's no additional significant staffing costs. The one staffing cost I've come up with is maybe a half-time nurse. But I think that can be easily managed in the budget that we have. It would be for limited number of days, and it's a not high-end salary. We're not identifying a lot of additional costs. The one thing we may have to think about is if this stretches into cold weather, we did make some reduction in our budget for heating because we're going to be in a net zero building. So there may be some additional costs for heating, but again, until we know how long this lasts, they could be really minimal.
Any other questions?
Can you repeat which grades are going to fit in?
Sure. Vinton will be the early childhood, so
Okay.
pre-K, K and 1, and Goodwin will be 2, 3, and 4.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So they will be with their teachers, that same teachers that will be going into the new elementary school with. No changes there, so it's just the location, but they have their cohort and their class, so.
Right.
Okay.
So it'll be the same classroom groupings.
Say that again?
It will be the same classroom groupings.
Yes,
moving
yeah,
from
no
one
change
building to the
in
next.
peers, right? So every child will be assigned to a teacher as a cohort for September, and they will stay with that teacher in that cohort till June.
I think personally it can be, it's not ideal, but it can be a smooth transition. When I was in elementary school, I grew up in Colchester, which has had multiple booms in population, and our new elementary school was not ready. And we moved in late fall, and it was very exciting to us to be able to do that. And I know that the adults might have been very, very worried, but as kids, we were just excited to be in our new home.
This is a little bit like the loaded tater tots, I experienced the same thing as a new administrator. I worked in a building that was not finished, and we actually had 3 locations where we housed a particular grade. And it gave them an experience, a shared experience together, and they grew in it together. And we didn't even move till February, and it was still very exciting. And within a couple of weeks, you forgot that you had ever been in another setting. Martha?
About the configurations. And now we have all these grade 2s in 3 different buildings. It's going to be in one building, grade 3 in one building. Are there going to be alterations to the?
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to be a different mix.
So the schools will completely be reset up, right? So that, all the second grade teachers, I assume, are going to be in, 6 classrooms near each other, and then the third grade teachers. And we had even gotten as far as in our planning to identify furniture needs. And so what we believe is easiest, and I asked today for a meeting with the moving company to go through this, but we think that, if Mrs. Lyman, teaching 3rd grade at Vinton School right now, a mover's going to come in and take every one of my desks and chairs and all my boxes of stuff and move it to Goodwin School, so that kids will have appropriately sized furniture and materials. It's a big job, I know. But we've already had our meeting with teachers about moving. I should have mentioned that probably in my update. On March 23rd, we had a 3 schools faculty meeting. We brought the moving company representative in. Collier's was there as well. And we went through with teachers the whole moving process and said to them, we do not have any information today that says the building will not be ready, but you should know we've been planning a plan B. And so we gave them information, now, what's that been, like 3 weeks ago, on how to pack. So you're going to pack fall boxes, the boxes of materials that you're going to need to unpack if we have to do 2 moves. And you'll have 2 sets of labels, one label with your classroom number in Mansfield Elementary School, and one label with your classroom number at whatever school you might be going to. They've given us all the different colored labels, so we're ready to go. And I have to say, it was a really positive meeting. I did not hear concerns being expressed from teachers about, what, I have to pack fall boxes? I mean, I think teachers are using this opportunity to really go through their materials and find out what's most important to them and really thoughtfully pack things up. We also already have them ordering the supplies they need for the fall. Those will be here before the school year ends. So I think they'll be well established in their rooms.
Any other questions? All right. Is there any?
No, that's it.
That's enough.
Yeah.
I don't believe we have any new business. That brings us to the second hearing for visitors. Seeing none, we'll go on to a motion to approve the consent agenda. Thank you, Edith. Second? Thank you, Kelly. All in favor? Raise your hand, say aye. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Any suggestions for future agenda items? That brings us to executive session, which will not be long, folks. No. So I would entertain a motion to go into executive session for the discussion of non-renewals for teachers. Invite Superintendent Lyman and Superintendent-elect Peter Dart. Is someone okay with that motion? Thank you, Jeanette. Do I have a second? You all in favor? All right, we will go into executive session at 9:27. All right, we are out of executive session at 9:38. I will take a motion to approve Superintendent Lyman's recommendation of non-renewal of teachers. Thank you, Catherine. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Edith. Any further discussion? Oh, I don't think we can do that. Okay. All in favor of the motion? Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Next is a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Edith. Thank you, April. Yes. And April. And we're adjourned at 9:39 p.m. Thank you, everyone, for your patience tonight. I know it was a long one. Thank you, Peter.